My name is MK Haley. I grew up in a suburb outside of Boston, Massachusetts. I did my undergraduate work at UMass Amherst, and one of the first degrees in computer animation in the world ever when I was an undergrad. And after going to my first SIGGRAPH, which was in Boston in 1989, I realized I wanted to get better at this. And so I went to grad school. I saw some interesting stuff that was coming out of Cal State San Luis Obispo. So I applied there. That was two random mechanical engineering students, and they're like, oh, no, she's not a mechanical engineer. They sent my stuff to Cal State LA. So I both went to and graduated, got my MFA from a school I never applied to, Cal State Los Angeles. I got a prop for you. So my first SIGGRAPH was 89 as a student volunteer. Super easy, right? It was in my backyard. I was hired by Disney in 1994. So this was from the Disney booth at SIGGRAPH. I was both a student volunteer because I was in grad school still, and an employee of the Walt Disney Company. And in the history of the most easiest questions to answer ever. So Disney had one of the Aladdin Magic Carpet VR systems in their booth, which had only opened July 1st, 1994 at Epcot Center. So it was brand new. It was a big deal. And they had one on site. And they said, we need rotating bodies to demonstrate this. We're not going to put anyone in this for like an hour or two or three at a time. Where on earth can we have access to willing volunteers? And I said, oh, there's about 300 student volunteers upstairs who would love to ride this thing. So my universes collided where I got to put together a little list of, hey, who wants to fly the carpet? And there was no shortage of volunteers willing to fly that carpet for Disney. So I like that. And then they were tearing the booth down. They were throwing these away. And I'm like, I'll take that. That was in Orlando that year. And I was working at Epcot Center on the Aladdin attraction. So again, SIGGRAPH was following me. There's a couple of folks who are very smart about taking advantage of what happens when SIGGRAPH is in town. DreamWorks, the day before the conference started, used to send busloads to the LA Convention Center to pull all educators. And then they would host them for a day in their Glendale campus to talk about what they did and what expertise they needed from students. So universities that were teaching computer animation got to walk through a production facility, be treated really well. And then DreamWorks helped build a pipeline that way by making relationships with faculty. Scott Owen calls it the gathering of the tribes. And he's so right? These people who collect and gather and mingle who never else throughout the year interact, and who are besties every year at this. And so folks who know how to leverage that, super smart. People will often say, oh, Disney was your first job. You got hired in grad school. And then I was there for 28 years. And I'm like, not really. My first job was when I was 10 years old. Everyone in my family paid for their own college. And so when we knew that was coming, so we were employed very young. And so I did a lot of interesting things, probably illegally now that we think back on that. I shouldn't have been working at 10. But the most formative stuff, I worked for about 10 years from about 1980 to 1990 in hospitals, nursing homes, and my specialty was quadriplegic males. A lot of aides didn't like working with men because you had to shave them and stuff. And I had no problem with them. And so the money was great. I could come home from Thanksgiving break, work 3 shifts and still be at the dinner table, be back to campus on Sunday. So I was doing it very specifically to pay the bills, but I accidentally became a subject matter expert in accessibility. I didn't realize at the time, right, that was the lens I had. But then as I moved into my professional career, I'm always the first one to say that ramp is too steep, that hedge is too high, those cobblestones are a little too deep. Can we make them a little shallower? So wheelchairs and walkers and baby strollers, can get by. Before I moved from Boston to Los Angeles after I graduated from UMass Amherst, I got a call from Jackie White, who was working at Cal State LA at the time, and who said, hey, I'd like to tell you that we're hiring you. They needed a graduate assistant to teach some of the introductory computer animation classes. So my first quarter at Cal State LA, I worked in the graphic design department. Cal State LA was invited by Walt Disney Imagineering to participate in a student design competition. Walt Disney Imagineering, which is the division that designs and builds theme parks, cruise ships, and resorts, they invited 7 universities and 7 student associations to participate in this design contest. So I didn't win that competition, but I was runner-up. But I won the internship that was on the table. And one of the things that Cal State LA had, which was great, was a partnership with JPL. So as an art student, I was mucking about with Bob Holtzman and some other folks at JPL. David M. was an artist in residence at the time there. one of the internships on the table was running this Aladdin virtual reality test lab that Imagineering was putting into Epcot. Can you actually tell a story in virtual reality? Will guests understand how to navigate the system? So here's how my interview went. He says, let me get this straight. You're an art student who knows how to operate on a Unix box? And I said, yep. And he said, can you start tomorrow? 24 hours later, I relocated to Florida to help in that lab. So we worked on a 6-day week. I was there from 1994 till 2020, primarily working with Disney Imagineering R&D and also Disney Research. They're separate, don't confuse them. So that took me all over California, Florida, California, Pittsburgh, California, Florida, California, because Disney Research had a lab on Carnegie Mellon's campus. So I've helped set up programs at a number of universities. We had a partnership starting in 2001 with UCLA. So Patrick Prince, who ran the SIGGRAPH Traveling Art Show, was very connected to the folks at Cal State LA. Jackie White, who worked in the Fine Arts Department at Cal State LA, was involved in the traveling show, as well as on the education committee. So immediately I got sucked into the education committee for ACM SIGGRAPH, wrote their newsletter for a bunch of years, was elected to be head of communications for them. At the same time that I was also still volunteering as a student while I was in grad school. I was made student volunteer chair in 1997 and kind of reimagined that program from the ground up. 97 was gigantic. I think I had over 500 student volunteers. In 2001, I was the emerging technologies chair, and also 2022, because that was very connected to what I did at Disney. I was in R&D at Disney, and I had exposure to a lot of some really nifty stuff that the rest of the world may not have seen. So we could do some outreach and some nice setup there. And SIGGRAPH asked for many years if I would be conference chair. And I'm like, I don't think Disney would approve of that. That's a huge commitment, right? At the time, it was a 5-year commitment. Now it's a 4-year commitment. And then when I moved to Pittsburgh to work with Disney Research at Carnegie Mellon, I was also teaching at Carnegie Mellon in the Entertainment Technology Center. And Carnegie Mellon said, is there any way we can get your name bigger in SIGGRAPH publications? Like, could you get like a more important job? And I said, I could be conference chair. They've been asking for years. And they said, great. And SIGGRAPH said, great. But that's how I finally flipped the switch to go from serving in 18-month cycles, conference to conference, to a longer commitment. 2013, we were a very different industry than we were in 97. So we need to reimagine what is the value of bringing people together in person. So 2013, I was conference chair. I got rid of several beloved programs. And we had some programs that felt popular, but for very tiny subsets of our audience, and it was a disproportionately expensive. Forge, FJORG, which was a student animation, like 48-hour hackathon. It was very expensive to operate because we had a lot of equipment that they worked on. It ran for 48 straight hours, so we had security concerns and such, and groups of 4 students who were, by the way, missing the entire conference because they were sequestered in this room. So when you ask yourself, to what end, how does that benefit SIGGRAPH? Not really, right? Like the students who win, that's great for them to put stuff on their resume, but the expense of providing the equipment, the electricity, the security guards for that event, food, versus what the general community, the conference and our attendee base got from it, that was another thing I got rid of. The student volunteer program had started running the guest speakers, which was great, like sort of exclusive lectures, but they were running a separate conference. They were having 6 hours of programming a day. And I'm like, wait, you guys, like there's an actual conference on the other side of the doors there. They had a sponsorship, they had a donation program. When the conference was over, they would walk the show floor and stuff people were throwing away, they would collect. So students would sit for 4 hours for this big giveaway for a comic book. I'm like, that's not a good use of anyone's time. One of the themes that I interwove through the entire conference was delight. Thinking about what do we do, what do you do, and how do you do it that is delightful? And whenever we had a question about should we do something or not, when you asked, is this delightful? Like, does this enhance our attendee experience in a delightful way? If the answer was no, we'd be like, all right, then we won't focus on this. It was yep, but like, we need to make sure that this happens then. Again, part of the response to why am I coming there in person? So they were concerned with undue influence from the conference chair. So for the 2013 conference, I wasn't actually allowed to sit in the jury. But some of the changes to existing venues that I made, both the studio venue and eTech, they can be very intimidating if you walk in and you can touch this thing, but you're not allowed to touch that thing. And it expects you to take the initiative, to step up. And that's terrifying for a lot of our attendees. So and same for emerging technologies, right? You as an exhibitor needed to be at your booth the whole time, or somebody who can represent your technology. And I added monitors up above, and our contractors, who are phenomenal, by the way, Freeman and AVW Freeman and Smith Buckland. It's such a pleasure to work with them all these years, 20 plus years for them. When I mentioned that it can be intimidating to show up to an exhibit that's like sort of a little tabletop thing and everyone's sort of like focusing on it. And Jim Clark, who is our AV lead, he says, well, how can we fix that? And I said, can we just put a monitor like up above it so that at a distance I can still see what's happening? And then if I so choose to fight my way to the front, but I don't just want 3 people to get it. I want a larger group. And he went to one of their 12, 18 wheelers that they had out back, and he went rummaging around and he came back with monitors. So every single exhibit I had a monitor so that our guests could enjoy it however they chose, a few steps back, a few steps closer. And then we did that across several venues, studio and emerging tech, most especially. In the studio, I did a few walkthroughs because that's like this glorious workshop, right? It looks like your dad's garage, right? With 3D printers over here and computers over here and there's embroidery happening over here. So I went through and I did a walkthrough just like a casual attendee. Not a single person approached me because you got introverts working with introverts. So then I did another walkthrough where I expressed a little interest and still didn't have any engagement. And so then I went through and sat down and asked very specifically questions about things. And sometimes the presumption was I didn't know what I was asking because I was female. I was routinely asked, is your boyfriend or your husband here? And so the presumptions that we may sometimes have about who is there, do they deserve to be there, why are they there? We still have a long way to go on that. So the team that runs those venues really wants you to have a great time. And they're sometimes not aware of how to be engaging. So we've put together some just top tips of make eye contact. Like if somebody is experimenting with your exhibit, say, would you like to try next, right? Assigning maybe student volunteers to help that. So again, this is all about the people part and the operations part and less about the thing, but it is what at the end of the day makes your guests get their hands on their thing, get their head in the thing, and actually be able to experience it. Because in the VR sections, there's often quite a few college installations, and they're the first ones who are acting like carnival barkers out there. Come see my stuff. They're all wearing matching t-shirts from their lab. And I'm like, y'all are adorable. I love you. Go teach the guys from MIT how to do this. Another change that I made with some of our longtime volunteers, I really encouraged them to do something different. Like Preston Smith, who's amazing. He was on-site e-tech kind of operations lead volunteer from 1996 to 2012. And he was very, very good at it. And I said, is there something else you'd like to get good at? And frankly, like let somebody else maybe have a turn at doing that thing you've been doing forever. And he was nervous. He says, I don't think so. Well, we made him the general submissions jury chair because he's great with people. He's great with details and organization. And that just happened to manifest in the emerging technology venue. But then when we rolled him over to another position, boom, suddenly he has this whole other level of expertise. And so giving individual humans opportunities for some stretch goals was a thing that I was pretty pleased with as well. And also, I just adored the Anaheim Convention Center staff. They know that they are in the shadow of LA. And for most companies, Anaheim is considered an away event, right? They'll have to pay for hotels for their and meals for their staff. Whereas LA is considered a local event, but folks in Southern California, and their customer service was amazing. They really bent over backwards to make sure we had the things we needed. They had just gone through a massive refurbishment. So everything was shiny and new. We had a panel co-sponsored by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. And it was a variety of industry professionals who had won Student Academy Awards and then gone on to major things. So Pete Docter from Pixar was there, Chris Sandberg from Disney, and then DreamWorks was there. It was a panel discussion, and it was sponsored by Alice Davis, was the primary supporter of it. The Motion Picture Academy was interested in being seen as more tech-based. And so they approached us to put together a production session. And it was so interesting, and it was getting so big that we're like, you know what? This is our keynote. Welcome to the 2013 keynote session. Especially as this is our 40th anniversary. I was very excited to celebrate with a very unique and special keynote session to celebrate the pioneers of the animation arts. The opportunity arose early in the planning process to do a collaboration with the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. I was absolutely thrilled to have this relationship. We'd like to especially thank Disney legend Alice Davis, who's here with us today. She gave her approval to allow us to use our keynote as part of the Mark Davis lecture series.
I find that no matter how mundane the assignment is, there is always a challenge in it. And I think that's how I keep fresh. It's the kind of thing, what in this haven't I done before?
Right. So when you do have a student or a young professional that you're working with, what is it that gets your attention and that makes you kind of decide to mentor them?
I would have to say it boils down to the ability to convey a simple idea clearly. It's the ability to communicate.
Yeah, I always think it's that when I was looking at portfolios of people, it's like, oh, these characters have a real point of view, and they convey, you know, they convey emotion. They're not just oh, I'm a funny character. No, it's just like, oh, I see what that character is thinking.
And on top of all the skills, what I like to see is someone who has ambition, someone who comes back a second time after you've talked to them and says, what do you think? I made some changes and I'd really like to share them with you. That need to keep growing is someone that I want to invest in.
And I want to thank you, gentlemen, for making this a very informative and humorous and fun and engaging conversation.
We'd like to have a huge thank you, obviously, to our illustrious panel here. By the way, I'm old now. Seeing folks who were my student volunteers in college now be industry leaders is a big deal, right? Like, because they growed up and they got valuable experience and invaluable relationships as working for that. So I have always encouraged my students, as well as my interns, do something with something on the side. Right? Because if it's just school home, or internship home, you're no more interesting or useful than the other kid, right? And I would get often at Disney 1,000 internship applications in 24 hours, right? So how are you going to differentiate yourself? Join a club. SIGGRAPH, Society of Automotive Engineers for my engineers, right? Themed Entertainment Association for my theme park folks. Anything above and beyond. And it costs, right? You miss a week of work to work at this conference. You have to pay for airfare and hotel and other things. It's not a free thing, but it is worth its weight in gold. So I think legacy-wise, at the end of all these years, the folks who I've introduced to SIGGRAPH volunteer opportunities who have then gone on to do great stuff in the industry, that might be at the end of the day what I'll put my finger on is, yep, that was cool that I got to do that.